Welcome to Flip Your Lid with Kim Honeycutt. Kim is a psychotherapist and executive director of ICU Talks, a mental health speaking ministry. This is a podcast about how to flip your lid and learning how to reconnect to who you really are.
All right, listeners, I got to tell you something. We're doing something a little bit different today. We have two beautiful, amazing women who are going to be a part of Flip Your Lid. And so we've got my friend Crystal here, and she started Brave Step. And then also her case manager, Yeting Liu, is with us as well. And so this is going to be really, really special. My goal is to not cry or reveal too many personal things to y'all. So let's just put that out there. But let me tell you about Crystal. She's the founder and executive director of Brave Step. As a survivor of sexual abuse and assault, Emerick found hope and healing through her own experience in therapy. After a long and healing journey, a passion for helping adult survivors, she found relief, was born in June 2011. At that time, the Eastern North Carolina native made a commitment to help survivors and their loved ones identify and receive quality trauma care and find connection with those who understand. Brave Step officially incorporated in 2014 with the mission of strengthening adults impacted by sexual abuse by providing meaningful steps on their healing journey. She is a graduate of UNC. She's a Tar Heel, y'all. I mean, she's super smart. She got a Bachelor of Arts degree in History and Political Science. She resides in Concord, North Carolina with her husband, son, and dog. And dogs are the best thing that God did. So we're so glad to have her. She's the founder of Brave Step with us. We also have Yeting Liu. She's the case manager, and she's a licensed clinical social worker. Significant experience in case management. She's worked with a number of nonprofits in Boston, Los Angeles, and D.C., including working directly with survivors of trauma such as domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. She's drawn to helping others to navigate hardships and obstacles in order to reach their goals and potential. She utilizes an individualized, strength-based approach when working with clients. She has a master's in social work from the other USC. She's not a Gamecock, y'all. Okay, a moment of prayer about that. She went to the school I could never get into, University of Southern California, and she had a concentration in community organizing, planning, administration. She also, listen to this, I don't know why she's talking to me. She has a BA in psychology and a BS in elementary education from Boston University. She's super smart. I'm going to have to behave today. She recently moved to Charlotte and has been getting to know the vibrant Queen City with her family. She decided to establish roots here in Charlotte with us. She has a husband, a daughter, and she also as a dog. So to both of you, so grateful that you're spending time with me today.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be with you, Kim.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So we're going to start with Crystal because, you and I go a little bit back. We've known each other for a while. We've done a podcast together before, and I think I cried through the whole thing. So thank you for making me, an Enneagram 8, cry. So way to go on that one. But I love you. I love your story. I love how you took it and you brought new purpose to it. So let's just start with where I always start. And then please tell us about what happened that flipped your lid, that disconnected you from who you really are. Tell us about what you did, what measures you took to reconnect to who God says that you are.
Well, I feel like my lid has been flipped more than once, to be quite frank with you. And as soon as I think that I've got my lid on secure, he tells me it needs to be flipped again. So I'll give you the beginning story, and then we can add to if we need to. But, my story, at least to what I'm doing these days. So I was sexually abused from approximately the age of 3 to about the age of 13 by a very close member of my family. And I looked up to this person. I spent a lot of time with him. And, especially early on, you adore. You don't know that these things that are being done and the touches are bad. And, we didn't really have this good touches, bad touches conversation when I was a kid. So I just didn't know. And over the course of those 10 years, just endured a lot of unspeakable things. But those things marked my life in a way that I still feel even well over the age of 40 now. But when I was about 13, that sense of shame and that sense of responsibility and guilt really overtook me. And I do believe he had a hand in trying to, urge me to come forward. And I told my mom, driving down the road, poor thing, that she was driving when I happened to blurt this truth out that I had been abused for all these years. And we did the best we could, not knowing, but we addressed it, the abuse stopped, and we locked it in a closet and moved on with life, or so we thought. When I was a sophomore in college, my roommate had a friend who was inebriated and needed somewhere to crash. And unfortunately, that ended up being on me that night. And it was just another layer of that trauma that resurfaced. And just, again, more pain and more shame that got, piled on top of an already very deep bucket of pain and shame. So when I moved to Charlotte, I think that was when he started to flip my lid, because Kim, I was in such a bad place. I was very hateful towards myself. I was coping in whatever mechanism I could, particularly alcohol, a workaholic, a perfectionist. Those things still are kind of in my closet sometimes. But I was honestly on my knees. I was in such a bad place. I was desperate for hope and desperate for an out. And I remember I was at my doctor's office, and I kind of whispered, because this is not a really, a topic that you scream at the top of your lungs, but I said, I need help. And she handed me 2 business cards, and she said, I don't know anything about these therapists, but good luck. And I happened to call one of them, who ended up being my therapist for 10 very long, painful years of trying to heal and recover. And I think it was all glory to God that he pushed me to make that phone call to ask for help. He pushed me through the door. The first day I stood outside of it, and fear had me stop still. And then he pushed me through those. I can't even tell you how many times I left a session saying, I'm never going back there. And he pushed me back. And I think that was probably my biggest lid that was flipped over the course of these years. But he continues to surface in lots of ways to tell me that I'm not done healing or evolving or becoming the person that I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, this is so beautiful and powerful. So, can you talk a little bit about, there's such a truth in re-victimization, and it's such a hard thing to talk to. You probably know about this with patients about that the likelihood, once you're molested, of other things happening because of, it has to do with body chemistry, it has to do with our brain chemistry, and we carry ourselves differently, and there's a re-victimization that happens. So just even how you dealt with that, how that, right? Like there's no more, it's always compound is my point after that, right?
I never learned, and it's something I've only had to start learning in the life, that I have a choice. I have an ability to say no. And that wasn't really something that I was taught growing up, that I can speak out. And so when that second re-victimization happened, I dissociated. I know that, through therapy, I was observant of what was happening. But honestly, I didn't kick, I didn't scream, I didn't do all these things that I wish I had in my mind. I wish I could have done. I did what my body had always been taught to do, which was just shut up. The sooner you do, the sooner it'll be over with. And yet that layer of, again, a chance of having power and not taking the power because I didn't know how to. And then that walk of shame the next day. I remember walking on campus, and I knew where that group kind of hung out, and this amazing sense of shame and embarrassment, like I did something wrong. That's the interesting part of sexual violence, right? It always puts the blame and the shame on the survivor, never the perpetrator, which is interesting.
Yeah. And we have a society where victim blaming is so incredibly acceptable. It's absolutely overwhelming in that, and Jenny, you can speak into this, but, we when there's the level of trauma, we go into dorsal vagal, like there's an internal collapse, and that people disassociate out of absolute survival. And first of all, we should never be in a situation we have to say no that strongly and have to kick and scream. But your body protects you. You have a physiological response about your vagus nerve that causes you to disassociate. And I know that perpetrators might not have those words, but they shall capitalize on the fact that that's what our body does. And would you speak into that, like how you explain to people about how we go into dissociation, and that does not mean that we're complicit?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the re-victimization, the cycle of violence, it seeps into you, and it gets into your body, and your body remembers all of that. And certainly, when Crystal or other survivors, when they talk about I wish I did this, I wish I did that.
Yeah.
It's really important to remember you did the best you can. Your body did the best you can. And like you said, like all of that biological kind of reactions come from your experiences. So,
Yeah. And it's your body trying to help you just live and survive.
exactly.
You know, what's happening to it. And just to jump in, for women to know, and this is for men because there are some men who are raped as well, your body will respond. Like you can be raped and become lubricated. That does not mean you're giving consent. And that's one of the biggest things I see with my patients that struggle with is that their body responded, whether it was their grandfather or somebody they were on a second date with, whatever it was. But your body's designed to do that. It doesn't mean you wanted it to happen to you. So, Crystal,
and I think the second part of it, sorry.
No, please.
The other part of it is, for those who experience it at such a young age or it's a continued abuse, there's not only that physical reaction, but psychological too. Like you want to be quiet because you know that's how you get through it. And that's all you know at this point without any support, any help. And so that's why it's kind of important to, for our message to get out. Like there are organizations, there are people out there that you can reach out to and start making the steps to heal and recover and get out that situation.
Yeah, this is an excellent point of the psychology of it, that you're going to be quiet so that people in the rooms don't wake up. Because one, you're blaming yourself, and you're in a situation you're not supposed to ever be in to know what to do. Right?
And who to trust.
Yeah, exactly. Who to trust.
I always had these dreams of being this big, buff, brawn, like woman that could kick some butt, because that's what I think my alter ego wanted me to do in all of these situations. But it's certainly not realistic because you guys know me, I'm not buff. But it's just, it's not my physiological training to be able to be that reactive in that way. But I agree. I think getting the message out to even to young men. I have a 4-year-old, and by the time he's 14, I can assure you we've had some very brutal conversations about it being physical and the importance of someone saying absolutely yes, I want to do this, or no, or even there's a maybe there that you need to assume that that's a no. Like always assume a no until you get a verbal yes. And even they have contracts now. I've heard in the high schools, they have like consent contracts that some kids participate in, which is another conversation for another day.
Right. But yeah, but stay on that track for a second, just because it really is like you're talking about that you weren't raised to say no, you weren't raised to fight back. And so how do we teach our little girls, how to be active, in this, exactly. And they're allowed to have a voice, because I think even part of, telling little girls they talk too much in the classroom, like there's so many things that we're doing that is silencing people that leads to pretty intense suffering.
Well, I know so I was born and raised in the South, and we all know the culture of a Southern woman. You smile and you hug and you say, yes, ma'am, and please, and thank you anytime you encounter anyone. And that's as simple as, a hug from a relative that you just may not be comfortable with. It was never taught to me that I could say no, or I prefer not to. And I know that at least we have a little boy and Yenting has a little girl, so it's a little different, but just giving someone permission to say, I'm not comfortable. Or an example right now is I don't want to sit on Santa's lap.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Just being able to give people, boys and girls, choices. And we tell that to my son a lot. If you don't want to hug, you don't have to hug. You just have to tell us so that we can support that. But I also think, Kim, it's parents being brave enough to have some honest conversations with their kids. And they're so afraid of talking about this, or good touches and bad touches, or, naming body parts. They're so weary of doing it. They just don't do it. And then, you end up like me.
Right. Well, you're right. It's about teaching little boys too, that it's about teaching everyone, because there's such a sexual shame that's out there. And so it becomes something that's never meant to be. And so it's equal rights of teaching, that it's your body, and that certain things are natural, and this is when it's okay, when it's not okay. And saying go hug your uncle is not okay. As simple as that sounds, that is a strong message to tell someone to go hug somebody they don't have any intention or want to hug.
Mm-hmm. And that's why this conversation is so important. It really stems down to a huge cultural and societal change, is basically what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And, I think the Me Too movement was a great, it really affected that kind of change. And we really started to be able to remove some of that stigma that's still, and it's definitely still lingering, but it's one step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting about 2020, and I'd like to hear how it's happened within Brave Step, is that there's a lot more conversation about rape culture. There's a lot more conversation about gender scripting and things that we're doing that's leading to horrific things. And so I just posted on Facebook a few days ago a simple thing about that girls' bodies are not responsible for boys' thoughts. And so the dialogue within that was very healthy. People were asking questions, interacting. Of course, one person came along and said, yes, this is true, but girls need to cover up certain parts of their body. So I even take the time to explain to her the contradiction of saying, yes, comma, but girls need to. I just deleted it because you're nowhere near an understanding of responsibility. And that is why we have so much victim blaming, because we don't know the difference between blaming and responsibility, because responsibility and blame have never met each other.
What's interesting to me too, Kim, is the people that blame are the people that also don't know that the person sitting right next to them, their aunt, their uncle, their mom, their dad, whomever, is a survivor.
There you go.
And I think that that disconnect of reality, sometimes I want to shake people. I want to shake them to realize that you say these things, but you're also saying them about those that you love that are right beside you that have gone through all of this. So I think there's a sense of naiveness and lack of knowledge. And I don't mean that to be mean, but I just think people don't know. They don't know and they don't choose to understand. And that I struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just realizing that, and y'all probably know the statistics, that if you're in a room of 20 people, that 17 out of 20, and it does cross gender. More males are coming out and sharing about what's happened to them. Like, the majority of women have been violated in one way or another in their lifetime.
It's staggering.
Mm-hmm. So what are y'all seeing? Well, actually, share with them, Crystal, like how it went from, long-term molestation as a child and coming out and telling your mom about that and your parents' reaction to it, later being victimized, and then Brave Step is born. Can you?
Okay. Yeah. So that's flip your lid probably 23. Like, that's something on the long-term list of flipping. So I was near the end of my healing journey, although it still continues at significant rates. But I was at the end of that 10-year period of healing, and I was sitting on my therapist's couch, the proverbial couch, and I was kind of venting to her because every time I turn on the news in the last however many weeks prior to that, there was a rape on campus. There was a elderly woman in a senior facility that was getting assaulted. Like, these things just kept bombarding me. And of course, I know now that he likes to deliver messages consecutively until someone like me actually listens and hears. Yeah. But as I was sitting on the couch, it is the clearest message I've ever gotten from God. But he said, go do something about it.
Wow.
And he didn't tell me, Kim. He didn't give me a script. He didn't give me a business plan. He didn't tell me who to start with. And so that sat with me so that was June of 2011, about 3 years, trying to figure out what go do something about it meant. And, I just started having conversations with people. I'm like, I have this idea, but I don't really know, but what do I do? And those certain doors shut and certain doors opened, and people that I had no connections with suddenly became connections. And, it's certainly, we know how it all came to be. It's very little to me. I was just a pawn in the moving things along. But and then finally in November 2014, we had an opportunity to do this program. And I was like, oh, and God had been telling me for quite a while, probably a year and a half. He's like, I want you to jump off this cliff. Go do this. I'm telling you to do it. And I'm like, I am not jumping off this cliff. I don't feel good about my parachute right now. And it wasn't really meant to be like, I don't trust him, but I was scared. To go into the world of doing sexual violence isn't exactly, you're not going to hit a home run. you will, but it takes a long time to hit a home run. And so, after cliff after cliff after cliff, he kept telling me to jump from. This chance came up to do this program. And I said, okay, I'm gonna apply. And if we get in, I'm going to jump off the cliff. And of course, sure enough, we got in. And I was like, I have to jump off the cliff. I was so afraid.
Right, of course.
And so I filed the paperwork, and like 3 or 4 weeks later, like the fastest return ever on a nonprofit status, we get a notice that we're now a nonprofit. And I'm like, I got to really do this now. So it wasn't a very beautiful way, but he has a way of continuing to push me until I listened and did what he's told me to do. So that day on the couch, he definitely flipped my lid. And I promise you there's been a lot more time since then.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so then how did you decide what the meat of the program was? Like what services you were going to provide for people?
Again, I have another God moment. So, I had been, while we were in this program, I'd been kind of struggling with, okay, we know we need to do counseling. We all here are believers that counseling is instrumental in sexual violence, but I couldn't really wrap my arms around what it was and how it should look. So I was struggling with that. And the night this program had its public performance, I was sitting in the crowd, and it was the coolest thing. So I'm supposed to be listening to these people, and all of a sudden he starts laying out our program, kind of our 5 options for care that Yunting can share about later. But it was as clear as like a light shining through. And I literally sitting in the audience, I was like scribbling the notes down because I didn't want to forget it. But he laid it out in a way that made total sense. And I was like, that's the moment. That's what we needed to know. And so again, like he just, if I will slow down and listen and just be for a few minutes, he usually delivers everything that we need. I just have to remember to do that first part.
Right, which is so interesting because that's so much a part of therapy, right? We get through trauma because we slow down.
Yeah.
Right, and so the program gets developed and we hear God a little bit more when we slow down. There's something so much with that, which goes back to the workaholism you brought up, the productivity, all those things which are part of self-harm we have to put aside if we're gonna connect.
I'm still doing that though. I'm still working on it.
Like it's one day at a time.
Yeah.
That's all we got. Right.
After all those years of therapy, last summer, I was sitting in church on a Sunday, and he again spoke to me. He flipped my lid again. He said, "You still have more work to do." And I'm like, I'm like, no. Like I did my 10 years. Like I'm doing good. And basically what he revealed to me is you still have a lot of shame issues. Like you can't love me more. You can't love your family more until you learn how to love yourself.
That's
it was
right.
pretty,
That's right.
It still is quite painful. I'm still on that journey of trying to figure out how to do that. But, I thought I was good. And then, one normal Sunday in church, he flips my lid again. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is too hard.
Is there anything you can share about this tangible about how you've identified some of the shame? Because shame does block our intimacy with God. It doesn't block his intimacy with us. It blocks our experience with him, right, in the shame. Anything in particular that you've noticed that helped you to identify it and get to a different place?
So what kind of led up to that, is again, constantly trying to work on my walk, trying to live fully, live the way we're guided to live. And I kept feeling like I kept hitting a roadblock. And so that was one of my first signs that something wasn't right. And when he started revealing, well, you still have a lot of shame, that you have, a lot of dislike of myself. When something goes wrong, it's an immediate, I blame myself. I didn't do it right. You weren't smart enough. The list can kind of keep going. And those feelings just started rearing their ugly heads like tenfold. And I think that was so he could get my attention and I could listen to him. And so I've, been doing some self-care work. I spent some time in a spiritual center to absorb what he's trying to tell me, but I'm still working on that script rewriting, and that's going to take a little bit more time.
Yeah, it's depth. That's good. Yedin, can you talk a little bit about your role and so people can kind of know if they are a candidate for Brave Step and the things that you're doing within the facility?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess going off of what Crystal said about those 5 programs. So basically it really takes into account that everyone has kind of like an individual healing journey, right? That not everyone's recovery is a one-size-fits-all. So this idea of having these 5 programs, or I like to describe it as like 5 points of entry, allows survivors to kind of pick and choose what makes sense to them in their healing journey. And they're kind of the ones in power in making their pathway to healing, right? So the 5 programs are individual counseling, the group therapy, the peer support groups, the empowerment and finding your voice programs. And so my role is basically to kind of guide them, be there to help them make their selection. And I try to be very mindful that, these are your choices. You can feel free to say no. I just really want to empower them to have them recognize that they get to make the choices. I can make their recommendations, but they can say no. They can say, you know what, I don't need individual counseling. I want to do an art group. I feel like that would be best for my soul. And that is absolutely fine.
So you from the get-go are using certain words intentionally because it is about choice. It's about being able to say no. It's about that self-connection and self-empowerment. So it starts from there. Can you tell me, because so much of what happens is our voice gets silenced. So I'd love to hear about your Find Your Voice program.
Yep. So Finding Your Voice programs, it really focuses on the survivor and in what space makes them feel the most safe to express themselves. So that could be writing, that could be art, that could be cooking. We did a cooking one recently. That could be music that we're trying to have that option as well. So just allowing them to recognize that there's a lot of different things that they can try out to see what best fits them and what will most help them find their voice again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So what does it take to be an individual therapist on your I'm a good therapist, cool person list?
Well, our therapists are definitely very much vetted. They have to be interviewed by our board member, one board member and an advisory board member. They have to fulfill certain qualifications that are that show that they have experience working with people who have experienced trauma and specifically sexual violence. And many of them, all of them actually, are either specialized in EMDR, in IFS, one of those evidence-based modalities that have been proven to help people with trauma.
Yes, good. For those of you listening, if you don't know, IFS is Internal Family Systems, created by Richard Schwartz, and it does a really good job of helping us understand our subpersonality or subparts and how to become integrated and become more congruent and become more of your essence of who you really are. So it's a great thing, and I highly recommend that. So you are really, really thorough because people are already wounded, people are already hurt. Just like Crystal, you finding the right therapist when you did. Like, that's God's hand. Not all therapists are created equally, or not all therapists know how to deal with trauma.
The other thing, Kim, too, especially because we're talking about God, religion does play a really big part in healing. We, as an organization, and this was intentional, and I did pray hard about this, we are not a religious organization. And part of that's because some people, unfortunately, were abused from within the church. Or
Go ahead, say it again.
They were abused from within the church.
Yes.
Or, my dad was a deacon and he was the epitome of a good citizen on Sunday. And then let's talk about what he did when we got home after church. And that's not meant to be a reflection on spirituality, but I love the fact that people have the choice to bring it in with them and use it, or they choose not to, or they have different, religious beliefs. But one of the unique things, and I love how Yenting explains this better than myself, but yes, we offer these services and they're important, but the other part that's super cool that we haven't seen in other organizations is we're creating community. And it's a chance for survivors, whether that's through our empowerment programs or art programs or peer support groups, like just to sit with another woman like we are right now and go, I get you and I'm with you, sister. And
that's right.
that alone is empowerment. And it gives me chills to think about the change that you can see in people when you start to validate them. One woman said at an event we did, I think this summer, she said, for the first time, I felt like I could speak my truth without having to explain myself, like without having to justify what she had been through. And that is a value you can't fabricate and you can't put a price on.
Yeah, powerful words that she spoke. That's really good. How do y'all handle, because it is about community, right? It's why AA works, it's why 12-step program works, all that. And at the same time, how are you teaching or being careful or observant of trauma bonding?
I'll let you take that, Yenting.
Go, Yenting.
It's an interesting question. We definitely, so because we have so many programs, I do make sure that I check in with like the therapist or the peer leaders or whoever's leading any of these programs. And just make sure we follow up on, was anyone triggered in these workshops? Is there anyone that we really need to follow up on? And from there, we kind of ensure that all the relationships that are being made are, not trauma bonding, not just remain with those boundaries.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I would think there's a lot of boundary teaching within, right? Particularly for people who are during their raising, their early developmental years, when the first imprints within their autonomic nervous system has to do with sexual molestation from a relative. Your ability to have boundaries and understanding what to share, what not to share, how close to get to somebody, like you have reactive traits. It's really difficult. So I'm sure you'll see that very much within your groups.
I experience it all the time as a survivor. I remember when my therapist handed me a book about boundaries, and I'm like, that B word, I don't like it. I still don't really love it, to be quite frank with you. But it's so hard for us to create boundaries, healthy boundaries, and to exercise that voice. And it's still, even with my husband in our relationship, I practice with him sometimes not very well, and sometimes better. But creating those boundaries is really hard as a survivor, I believe.
Yeah, it definitely takes time, and with guidance, with tips, and just making sure that it's a safe space, that they're allowed to kind of make those mistakes and be okay with it. Like, that's exactly what we're here for.
Yeah. Tell me if there's something that comes to mind of like a really powerful moment, maybe happened within like group therapy or something that you saw that just gave you that confidence that this program is on the right track. Did any of you observed any of that?
There's so many of those small moments, right? Yeah. The one I'm thinking of, we recently had an art group, and it wasn't supposed, art group, it's a peer-led group, and the idea is just we build a project together, we create something together. And we don't really go very deep into anything, but in this particular project, I don't know, everyone just, like that community, again, having that sort of feeling that everyone is safe and, we're making this stuff together, and it kind of refocused everyone's minds. And one of the participants just brought something up that was that she's going through, and she was going through a tough time, and everyone just came together and just helped her realize like she's not alone in this, that she is open to reach out to us, that if she wants to talk more about it, we're here for her. And you could just see it in her posture and the way that she was speaking, that that moment really helped her.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
There was a survivor in the early years when we started peer group. Peer group was the first thing we started because it was easy and free. Right. And I remember this in particular girl who came in, who's still with us. But when she came in, she gave us a fake name. That was right out of the gate. And then she sat in a chair, like hunched in, and she wouldn't look up. Like this was pretty much her face the whole time. And she wouldn't speak a word. And that went on for probably 3 months of doing peer support group. Then she started opening up just a little bit, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And I would say within a year, she was almost one of the most dominant voices in that group. And she sat up, and she had a court case, and many of our survivors actually went with her to the trial when she got a successful verdict. And, we've had people with her on her journey, and it's just the confidence that she has now. And to be able to watch that change was, for me, it was like, all right, we're doing something good. Like, keep it up, and some days with this work, and this, Kim, you need those affirmations because it's hard and it's challenging sometimes, but it's very rewarding when you look at those small moments like Yenting was talking about.
Yeah, it's beautiful because, we brought court cases and helping victims follow through. And it's one of the most difficult things because the system is not for the victim. And I've had 2 cases, and I was a probation officer for a period of my time. Yenting, you probably don't know that about me. So I had many cases there where slap on the wrist, where judges would say, I wouldn't do this to my granddaughter. You look and act like me to the perp, so I don't think you'll do it. Like, I can't tell you case after case of just, no conviction whatsoever. And then as a therapist, I've been able to walk through with 2 people from start to end where they actually, the perpetrator got a prison sentence, a long-term prison sentence. And it's phenomenal and overwhelming to see the victory that these people get. Now, even if the person doesn't get convicted, it still might be the right thing for you to do. But it's so rare. And one person, think of it, he's a male that was molested by a youth leader. And the way he was treated on the stand was unbelievable. But he persevered, and that young man who molested him got 18 years. Wow. And we don't see that enough. We just don't.
The system, my blood will boil pretty quickly when I think about our system and the way it's designed. And I think on this issue, in my personal opinion, I think the perpetrator should be the one that has to prove that he's innocent as opposed to the victim doing it.
Amen.
In how many cases as a child survivor or even a rape do you collect evidence? I mean, I never went for a rape kit test after I was raped. It didn't even cross my mind, and I'm not even sure they had them back then. But there's so many barriers that make doing the judicial system pushing people to do that. And we usually try to, since we don't, that's not our specialty, but we do try to say, here's the information we have.
Right.
Think about this before you do it, because it is traumatizing, even if you get a successful victory.
Right. Well, the rape kit's traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going for that after being raped, and then having people for hours take pictures of your entire body and touch you, and it's just not set up for someone to be okay, which is another reason for your program, because that's where the healing comes in, and that's where the community comes in for people.
I'm a big believer too that the more people we can heal, the louder their voice will eventually become, and that might be in just a family voice, that I now have the power to tell my son about good touches and bad touches, or maybe that, you're a little crazy like me and you end up, being much more vocal, but there's a lot of variances in between. But until we can heal people, we can't give them the power to then be an advocate or a change maker on this issue. And so that's really big deal for me, is giving people that power.
Yeah, because that's what y'all were doing. It's just so, because I've worked with a couple of people in particular I could think of who it is molestation by proxy. It's their sister, there's someone else in the household being molested by their father, by somebody else, and what they go through. And I can't tell you how excited I was. I don't know if that's the right word, but just relieved. I was relieved when someone came to me and it was molestation by proxy, and I said, I know exactly who to connect you to. Let me tell you about Brave Step. Let me tell you about people who are going to love on you, who will never say it's different for you. That you went through this too, and your body's still going through it as well. And so that's a beautiful part of your program. Y'all understand that so well.
Yeah, I think loved ones, and that's a broad group, but I think loved ones are a really missing piece of the equation for survivors and for themselves. And we're working on a project for loved ones, a much more in-depth project. And one of the things the folks that we're working with keep reminding me, they're like, it's trauma. A loved one is having trauma. It's not secondhand trauma. It's direct trauma. Right. And we can't we don't need to label it as secondhand
Right.
because it sort of
Yes, good.
diminishes the impact. And I think that, that situation in anyone, they need to be able to have the skills and the tools to care for themselves and also care for that survivor. Otherwise, we're only doing 25% of our job, making a positive impact.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It reminds me of listening to Columbine High School victims. And one of the questions that they would be asked, once, post, after like a year or two, I think they said that people would ask when they found out that they were a Columbine survivor, is they would ask them, what part of the building were you in? Like, it doesn't matter. I was in the building.
Right.
Right. I think it's the same thing, that if you're in the same household and that's been happened, like it's not secondhand.
No.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yet, what drew you into this specialty with the sex trafficking, with the sexual violence? What drew you towards this professionally?
I think my first time working with survivors, I think that moment I just realized how the spirit and the strength of these survivors is infectious. It really is, like Crystal, prime example.
Right.
Just having that heart and that soul, it just and me being able to be a part of their journey and to help anywhere that I can. That's something that I want to continue to do.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Is this type of field, being a psychotherapist, being in the psychology field, is that what you always wanted, or is it just evolve over time with your 20,000 degrees?
To be completely honest, I don't consider myself a therapist at all. I know I have the license to be able to be that position if I want to, but the reason why I like case management is because I'm there. I can see kind of like the tangible results and be there physically or virtually nowadays to walk them through their whatever that they're trying to achieve. And with therapy is kind of a slower progress, and I'm not always there to kind of guide them, but that's why I like to be in this position. Yeah.
Especially with being a trauma-informed therapist, like it has to be a very slow process. Has to be. Right. There's no instant gratification. Instant gratification is my friend. Let me be clear. But not when it comes to trauma-informed therapy whatsoever. Right. As an organization, Brave Step, what is your biggest need right now?
Oh, I've had this question before. And can I tell you back then what my answer was? Yeah. It was money. That was my first.
Is it the same answer? Do you have the same answer?
Well, no, actually I have a different answer. And I'll refer to who told me what the right answer was. It was God. And I had been at this thing and I'd spoken and someone said that. And I said, well, money, of course. Like that solves all the world's problems, right? And as I left, I was thinking about that. And he was like, no, you need an army. You need to build up an army of people.
Amen.
Because if we build the army, the money's going to come. Like that's all
good.
fine.
That's
but
good.
One of the things we're working on is building up an army. We're calling them change makers. And it's people that come along and say, in whatever capacity, as a survivor, as a loved one, as a community, as an employer, whatever that role is, because there's a role for all of us, I'm going to raise my hand and say, yes, I want to learn more and I'm going to do something. Each person, that something's different, but I'm going to become a change maker. And we're trying to build the army based on these power agents, these people that want to make change in some capacity. So that's my answer. I need an army.
But I love your vocabulary. I love the, the power agents and people, agents of change, and just the things of how you put it, because that's what it is. Because really, people even taking a class that helps people understand part of what happens within a rape culture and what's happening to people, and then them saying one thing to somebody, Harris Teeter, like that's the cascade. Like that's life changing for people. It really is.
And we've heard from some of our survivors that as they started to heal and be validated by other survivors, they became a little bit more brave in having that conversation with their husband. I remember this woman when I was early, and this is one of my people that I tested out this crazy idea about. She was this dynamic, bold, brilliant businesswoman, and I admired her. And I took her my loose business plan, and she she basically busted my bubble. And she said, this is never going to work. Don't do it. And like a week later, she called me, and you're going to guess where this is already going. And she was a survivor, and she was the second person she had ever told. She hadn't at that time even told her husband. And her reaction was, of course, to lock up and to kind of shut down. And she called me a couple months after that, and she said, I finally had a chance to talk to my husband about it. And just that little bit of a shift and change, to have a bold conversation with your husband, that creates change. And so I think that it's just amazing that we can give people the power and the validation to be able to have, very important conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brave Step is in Charlotte, North Carolina, for those who are listening all over. Are there franchises, so to speak, of this? Are there other things that you know of that are similar to what you're doing? I know it's unique. I know it's creative. And I'm not saying there's a replacement. I'm just curious. Are other places doing things this beautiful and doing these type of programs?
I don't know. I'm biased, of course. I mean,
Right.
For all local, or most local communities, especially the bigger, there are rape crisis centers. Those are typically great points of entry for counseling. We're pretty particular when people call and ask for recommendations on therapists. So if you're looking for a private practice therapist in whatever market, and Kim, you can attest to this, do your research and demand the very best. Like, just because they say they work with trauma doesn't mean they actually work with trauma or work with sexual violence. But, down the road, when that lottery ticket comes in, or our army's that big, maybe we could franchise our organization. I would love to see that expansion, because I think that I think the need is still so huge, and we're not even knocking on the door community wise in serving the needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so true. So, is anything about Brave Step for our listeners that you want to make sure, if they could hear one thing and you could kind of throw it out there, what would it be?
Well, Brave Step, I think, when we talk about trauma treatment, it can be a scary word. And, but when you go through a program like Brave Step, I want to assure you that in some way you'll find some joy.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
remember that.
Yeah. And so I define trauma, and I'm not the only one, this is not like unique of me, but that it's a disconnection from your essence. Right. And so when you're disconnected from your essence, who you really are, we will fill that crack with behaviors where addiction comes in and mutilation and different things come in. And so what's happening is we're taking the shame out of it and being able to see who you really are, and you're not what was done to you. And if some people listening, you're not what you did to somebody else either. But when we stay in that and believe that, the longer we stay there, the more shame that comes in, the more behavior comes in, then we really believe that's who we are. And Brave Step does such an exceptional job of helping people be on that journey and really just shed all those layers to find out that they've never, ever deserved what happened to them.
And what they do deserve, Kim, is to have people that believe them and that can help them lay out whatever options of care are available and best for them at that point in time. And just to say, I'm with you. And that might be in silence, or it might be verbally, but I'm with you. And that affirmation is so powerful.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate that. And I just want our listeners to know, like, if it's just your uncle watched you urinate, that is molestation. If it is something that you think is benign because your cousin was younger to you when it happened, I need you to know that age doesn't matter. I need you to know what they do for a living doesn't take away what was done to your body. And that if you need a resource, that Brave Step is absolutely a safe place for you to go. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to put you on the hot seat a little bit. This is how we end. Flip your lid. And so this is what we do, people in group therapy, right? You throw them in the hot seat. So now y'all are going in the hot seat. So, Crystal, we'll start with you. So this will be quick answers. So that's where we're going to start. First word that comes to mind when you hear the word clarity.
Peace.
What's that?
Peace.
Peace? All right. So same question for you. When you hear the word clarity, what do you think first?
Hope.
Hope? All right. Yenny, here's a question for you. What do you like best about yourself?
I like that I am compassionate.
Yeah. All right. Crystal, what do you like best about me? Just kidding. What do you like best about yourself? You can answer that too. I'm fine with that. But what do you like best about
Kim?
Yeah, me too.
So what do I like best about myself?
Yeah.
You're asking the shame person to say something.
Yeah. And we're all three sitting in shame. When we answered, we're doing something.
Go
for it.
I think my drive and my the vision and the drive to do something to help other people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All right. Yenning, what is your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. What is it about Thanksgiving that's better than Christmas? Just curious.
I like it. Honestly, it's just one day.
Right.
Christmas is just like the entire month.
Right.
It can be really stressful.
Yeah.
So Thanksgiving is one day. There's a lot of great food. And pre-COVID, it was one day of family.
Right.
And that was it.
And it's cheaper. You don't have to buy a bunch of gifts.
Yeah.
Right? It's cheaper. All right. So, Crystal, what's your favorite quote?
Oh, that's a hard one. I wish I could remember the one on the front of our brochure. It's from Maya Angelou that says something like, the greatest thing is the fear that's been left inside, or it's something like that. It's what's locked inside is sometimes the best and the worst thing, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. All right. Last thing, Yenning, this is for you. Favorite scripture? You can make something up.
Oh.
All right, we'll pass it to Crystal. Crystal, what's your favorite scripture?
Well, and I actually have it on my necklace, John 3:16.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
scripture.
reminder, right, of why we do all we do. So that's a good one to keep.
It's a great one to keep. Well, both of you are great to keep. You're amazing people. Thank you for being on the front line. Thank you for the work you're doing. I thank you that COVID, trauma, anything, nothing has stopped you from being vessels for other people and being there for those who need it the most. I really appreciate that. If people were trying to find y'all, where would they go? Whether it's Instagram handle, website, where would you send them?
Bravestep.org is the best first place. And then, of course, we are on Facebook, Instagram. But I think Brave Step gives you a great starting point as to how to connect with us at a deeper level.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. All right. Well, thank you both. I appreciate your expertise and your vulnerability very much. And to all you listeners, I know you heard many things today that flipped your lid. Also praying that you also heard something that helped you reconnect to who you really are. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Lid with Kim Honeycutt. Please subscribe, rate, and share. You can find Kim on Facebook or Instagram at kbhoneycutt. To get an autographed copy of Kim's book, visit butyourmotherlovesyou.com. Remember, no matter what, treat yourself well today.